Okay, I got the signal. This is a presentation entitled Anastasia, Across the Dark Forces Window of Time. I'm going to actually start, though, not with Anastasia, but with Edgar Cayce. I'm sure everybody here has heard of Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. In 1944, he gave a reading, and there actually I found several other readings that went along the same line, but this particular quote is from a reading he gave in 1944. He said, "In Russia, there comes the hope of the world. Not as sometimes termed of the communistic or Bolshevik, no, but freedom, freedom. That each man will live for his fellow man. The principle has been born. It will take years for it to be crystallized, but out of Russia comes again the hope of the world." Out of Russia came a young
Trump. I'm sorry.
Trump.
Out of Russia came Donald Trump.
I don't know what that has to do with my talk.
I'm sorry. So sorry.
A Russian mystic was born in Siberia. Anyway, good start. A Russian mystic was born, and when she was just crawling and learning to walk, her parents were mysteriously struck by lightning. And her grandfather and great-grandfather, both of whom were still alive, raised her. But they didn't raise her by interfering with her. They stood back and observed this young, very, very young lady interact with nature. And Anastasia grew up with amazing gifts, talents, and abilities that surpassed the average person. I refer to her as the female Christ. She was that gifted. She could literally she could dematerialize and rematerialize in another location. I don't know how to do that, and I don't think anybody in this room does yet. It may be our destiny to learn such things, but we haven't mastered that yet. Just an example, Vladimir Negra, who was married with a couple of children, met her because he was fascinated by something that he had learned on one. He was a riverboat captain who took tours in the summertime up and down the old river. And on this one occasion, he met the grandfather or the great-grandfather, I don't remember which one. But in any case, he met them, and they told him about the ringing cedars of Russia. These trees that in the vastness of the temperature dropping and rising would actually emit a sound that sounded like they were ringing, known as the ringing cedars. And that fascinated him, so when he went home and in the wintertime he began to study, and then he went back looking for them. But instead he met a young lady who happened to be their granddaughter, great-granddaughter, who was Anastasia. She came out and met him and ushered him back to her taiga, where she lived. She lived in the wilderness. She never lived in a construct of a home like we would think of it. She lived in nature. She didn't wear clothes in her own setting. So when they reached a certain point going back, she took off her clothes. Well, he took that as a sexual advance. It wasn't. He he reached and tried to touch her, and she paralyzed him, froze him in his tracks. And when she brought him back, she explained to him that that's how she lived. She was just one with nature. And she could communicate with the animals. She was friends with all sorts of wild beasts and everything. And when they went back and he realized there was no place to stay, she says, how will I stay warm? It gets cold here at night. She says, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And so he wakes up and he finds himself sleeping next to a bear. And of course it startles him and frightens him. And she just speaks to the bear, and the bear gets up and goes away. Not a threat at all. But anyway, he said the next night when they were ready to go to bed, he says, he asked her, how will I stay warm? She says, well, I'll take care of it. You can hold me. And so she slept next to him. And he doesn't remember a thing that happened that night, but the next morning he's absolutely ecstatic. And she said, we're going to have a son. Now, he didn't remember anything. He had to go and learn from psychics and mystics and stuff later on what happened. But she became pregnant that night that they slept together and ended up having a son called Volusia. And I think I might have talked about that in one of the previous talks, because that's in book 6, I think, or something like that, which is the only book I had for a while till I found all the rest of them. In any case, Volusia grew up very gifted also, even more so than Anastasia. From just a little toddler again, he could do things and see things that the average person couldn't. And as I said, she had the ability to bilocate. When Vladimir Megra, got scared, he went and tried to get drunk, and again was going to get beat up by the boyfriend of the woman that he was going to supposedly hit on, because he was really confused. He thought he felt like he was being hypnotized, and he wasn't in charge of the whole thing. And it threatened his sensibilities, because she was so much more powerful than he was. So he, again, was very, very frightened by the whole thing, and ended up writing the book. And he ended up writing 9 books, and I understand a 10th one actually exists. I've never gotten that one. But I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 26 and 27, which covers the dark forces window of time. And
Which book is it?
this is book 1. This is the opening book. And again, after he wrote this book, even before he wrote this book, I guess, he became very confused at what was happening with this lady that seemed to be so much more connected than he was connected. And extraordinarily quickly, and everything was so specific down to the finest detail, she said. So now you think it's going to come true, he asked her. Yes, it will. There wasn't anything else you dreamt about at the time. You've told me everything about your dreams? Not everything, she said. Then tell me everything. Do you really want to hear it, Vladimir? Really? Yes, she said. Anastasia's face brightened as though illuminated by a flash of light. It was with inspiration and excitement that she continued her incredible monologue. During that night of my dreams, I thought of how to transport people across this window of time of the dark forces. My plan and conscious awareness were precise and realistic, and they accepted them. In the book, and it's actually books you are going to write, there will be unobtrusive combinations, formulations made up of letters, and they will arouse in the majority of people good and radiant feelings. These feelings are capable of overcoming ailments of body and soul, and will facilitate the birth of a new awareness inherent in people of the future. Believe me, Vladimir, this is not mysticism. It is in accord with the laws of the universe. It is all very simple. You will write this book guided only by feelings and your heart. You will not be able to do otherwise, since you have not mastered the technique of writing. But through your feelings, you can do anything. These feelings are already within you, both mine and yours. but they will be understandable to many. When they are embodied in signs and patterns, they will be stronger than Zoroaster's fire. Do not hide anything that has happened to you, even in your most intimate experiences. Free yourself from any sense of shame, and do not be afraid of appearing ridiculous. Humble your pride. As I said, Vladimir had a real rough time hearing this message, as I'm sure you and I would also have a rough time, because she was speaking of a dimensional reality that we have not experienced yet. But she experienced it and actually transcended the world that we lived in. As I said, she foresaw something about Russia that most of us don't know. Russia is one of the most ancient places on earth, and the Russian language is one of the most ancient languages. Russia was not set up. Russian Orthodoxy was something that was introduced by the West. But the Russian people, their spirituality was in touch with nature. They could communicate with the plants, with the animals, and it wasn't a mysticism that was otherworldly. It was a mysticism that was this worldly. In the present physical universe, the present dimension of reality. And that's the thing that infuriated the Pope and others that were trying to get people out of the this worldly consciousness, that everything that we need is here right now, to try to escape to some other things. And that's why whenever I get a message from somebody that talks about escaping somewhere, it immediately turns me off. We don't need to escape, we need to be here now. We need to be here in the physical and allow the spiritual and the physical to become one. It's a marriage of spirit and soul and body. There's nothing wrong with the physical creation, except it's been hijacked, and we've been part of this grand experiment that has allowed us to experience the dark side and potentially the light side. But most of what we've experienced as humans has been very negative, very dark-side-ish. And that's one of the things that I think Anastasia was trying to get across to Vladimir, and it took 9 books, or maybe 10, to actually get the message across. And he finally got it, and he goes around the world now, I guess, lecturing on this. I don't know what happened to her. I've tried to find things online, and believe me, there are things about the books that are very, very uplifting and promising, and how wonderful they are and how transformative the reading of the books have been in people's lives. And there are others that totally try to debunk the whole thing and say it's all BS and don't believe any of it. And of course, the powers that be would want to debunk something like this because it would undermine everything in their game plan to create a one-world power of domination and control. Again, out of Russia comes the hope of the world. There's a spiritual renaissance that's actually taking place since Russia threw off the Western oligarchy that was run by the communists and stuff like that. And in Russia, they are building communities, literal communities, but everyone has their own perpetual space of love that they're given to farm the land and live on the land. And it's like, I forget how many, 2 or 3 hectares, whatever that is. But even people in the city are doing it on rooftops and wherever that they're planting gardens, and they're getting in touch again with the earth and reconnecting with the earth, which is actually a very spiritual thing. It's not an escape, it's an escape thing to want to go somewhere else. It's the opposite of escapism when we recognize that we're here now and we have the potential, if we are willing to allow the insight to come in and follow the inner vision, follow our hearts, we are able to move into a dimension that will transform not just us individually, but it will have ripple effects that will go out to everybody around us, and it will change the world that we're living in from one of fear and domination to one of love and cooperation where we learn to work with each other instead of working for money. Money is, of course, the main, what do I call it? The main instrument that was invented to control people. They didn't use money in the ancient world, and especially not in Russia. Everything was given. In fact, Dr. Lenoy, he talked about, he gave a lady a ride, about 2 miles or so many kilometers in Russia, and when he got to her house, he wanted to give her money, and she was offended by the fact that he wanted to give her money. And instead, she said, he had 2 children, let me give you something. She took out a sack, and she filled up a 50-pound sack with apples. And he kept saying, enough, enough. But she wanted to give him that. And the whole thing, the whole lifestyle in ancient Russia and still modern Russia, the ones that haven't been totally brainwashed in the rural areas, they still are very giving, very loving people. It's very different than the culture we've been raised in, that we are now being called and asked to transcend our culture, to open our eyes, and more importantly, open our hearts to allow in energies that will literally change us from the inside out. It's not from the outside, but it does change the outside. If enough of us get on this bandwagon, if you will, and allow these changes to take place within us, we will discover abilities that we didn't even know we had. Latent abilities that have always been within us. Always, in every lifetime, regardless of how dark it was, regardless of how much we were suffering and in fear, they are still latent within us because this is a light and a reality that cannot be put out by any external force. And it always exists. It is from the beginning to the end of creation, and there is no beginning or end. We are in that continuum right now. And this was the thing that Anastasia, at least my take on what she gifted us with. Now, there are many things she talked about. She talked about eating habits. She was probably a vegetarian, although I don't know that for a fact, but she was probably a vegetarian. And I'm not preaching vegetarianism either. I mean, we have to be thankful for whatever food we have and receive it however we're going to receive it. If that's your calling, that's your calling. I tried that once. It didn't work for me. Now I do everything in moderation. But in any case, Anastasia gave us a vision of what can happen if we allow ourselves to awaken. If we allow ourselves to become that which is inherent within us to be. It's a very, very powerful lesson that I think humanity is obviously, many of us are ready for and open to. And there are other healers that have come along. There's, of course, Bruno and Bracco. Now, there's negative things. Yeah, there's negative things about all of these things because there's always going to be the naysayers. But these are people that have the gifts of healing. And they don't have to go through any fanfare, just the gaze. Just the healing gaze. And I know you know what I'm talking about. And I think everybody in the room probably knows to some extent what I'm talking about. And this is where we're headed. Now I saw or I listened. I have a Vona reader, so I don't read long articles. I let the computer read it for me. I highlight them and the computer reads it for me so that I can just sit back and close my eyes and listen. It's hard when it's a foreign language and there's, it's subtitles. But when I can, I listen. And this person was saying that there's the whole plan, and then I totally disagreed with the writer of the article. I don't even know who it was, doesn't matter. but said that there's a shift now from the west to the east, and China and Russia are part of the dark forces plan to take over. I think that is total BS. Russia and China, Russia has rediscovered its spiritual roots, number one. Number two, China has been a communistic nation, just like Russia was, but there's also an awakening that's happening there. And the grandfathers and the elders, the Chinese elders, have always been the ones that are in the background, even when the politicians that think they're running things are in the foreground. The spiritual realities are in the background. And remember, we're talking places more ancient than the United States, by the way. And I'm not downplaying the United States. We've played a role in all of this. In fact, it's all probably roles that we've been all playing lifetime after lifetime. I do believe that this lifetime is not the only one we ever live. Edgar Cayce's probably already back. Who might be Edgar Cayce today, do you know?
I'm sorry, what?
Who might be Edgar Cayce today, reincarnated?
I have no idea.
What's his name?
David Wilcock.
David Wilcock.
David
David Wilcock claims to be the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce.
Correct.
And whether you agree with that or not, there's certainly similarities. I mean, I've listened to the stories, and there are definitely similarities. There's lots of things that we don't know. And if I can leave you with any type of encouragement, it's do your best, as I need to do my best, to keep our minds and our hearts open to new possibilities, because we're living on the cusp of tremendous change that the world probably hasn't experienced in millennia. And we're there now, and somebody said the age of Aquarius is going to come in 2154 or something. No, to me, this is the age of Aquarius. We're in the early stages of it. It's a new awakening, a new birth of freedom, a new birth of humanity, a new birth of the positive, when we've gone through all of the negative BS that we've had to go through all of our lives, and we've watched others go through. We've watched a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. I do think that we have the ability to make those changes now. That's why some of these gifted people are coming on the scenes, and they're touching. Each has their gifts to give, and each has their perspective to share. And if we're open enough, we'll be able to receive some of these things from other dimensions and not close ourselves down to the ideas. And recognize that there is no negative. There is no positive. There just is what is. And what we experience is what we experience. Experience is never negative or positive unless we label it so. There are no negative experiences. There are no negative thoughts. Deal with them as just thoughts, as just experiences, and accept the reality of our lives as it unfolds, and be open to the transformation of our own being. I think I'm going to open it now to questions or comments.
Yes, about the Russian people, I just have here a video about the girl, 3 years old. It's a baby girl. And she is